My name is Conor. I'm Director of Tribe Architects. We're based in Galway, design practice, and we specialise in one-off houses. So it could be renovations, new builds, extensions. The scale isn't hugely important to us. It's, I suppose, just being able to bring architecture to anyone who's got a need for a certain design in a certain area. So, we do everything from big multi-million pound homes in the country to tiny extensions. So, I suppose there's different types of architects. As you mentioned, they're commercial, residential, industrial, but we all essentially, we design buildings of some form for clients, be it private or public. And an architect brings a level of expertise to the design element of it. We do we get landed with a lot of other stuff, and we do get heavily involved in the administration side of things and getting a building built, if so the client so wants. But the real area of expertise for an architect is in the design element, and that's something that you don't get from other professionals out there, whereas other professionals can do certain other elements of it. Oh, right at the start. Yeah, so right at the start, if you're in the process of doing some sort of a build, if it's a new home in the country, I would say to you, the first person you should call is the architect.
Really?
Yeah.
And what about in terms of finance and mortgages and stuff? Should they go and see how much money they can get first and then come to you and say, look, this is the maximum amount I can get? Or should they go to you first and then go to the banks?
I suppose an understanding of what it costs would be really good to start off with, because if you go to the bank and they say, we'll give you 200,000, and I know that 200,000 won't build a new home in the country if you're going to go through the proper routes to do it. So why not have a chat with your architect first to try and understand, well, what actually does it cost to build a house? And that would all be for us anyway, we wouldn't charge you anything for that conversation. That's just some friendly advice to start off with. Then you have an understanding of, well, now we know what it's going to cost. Let's go to the bank now and see if we can get that kind of money. If you understand what an architect can bring, you're the kind of person who's going to want an architect. And some people, the reality is, you don't need an architect to design a house. You don't actually need an engineer to design a house. You can sit down yourself, you can take out a piece of paper and you can design a house. And you can submit that for planning and you can get planning permission for that. So there's no professional qualification that you need in order to get planning permission for a house. It's different when you go building it and mortgages and insurance companies get involved. But to design a house, anyone can do it. The question is, do you want it to be done by somebody who is professionally trained in designing a house, or do you want it to be done by somebody who can sign off on it? And that's the real question. Because people think that, there's this huge expense with an architect. Not necessarily. I can design the house and you can take it to an engineer then and get it built. That's no problem. People do need an engineer. I can't design structure, I can't sign off on structure. So in order to build a house, you do need an engineer. But in order to design it, I would say an architect is far more qualified than an engineer. Yeah, fair enough, an engineer will design it and can design it, and some of them do design quite well. But your engineer also isn't going to design it for free. So what you have to look at is, what value am I getting over and above what an engineer is going to give me as an architect? And one of the big things is an efficiency of space. So a lot of houses now come down to cost per square metre. All right, and the cost per square metre to build a house in Ireland is quite high at the moment. So for every square metre you save in design, you get that money back in your pocket essentially. Now it's not exactly like that, because most of the time the square metres that you're saving are the least expensive part of the house. But if you have a cost per square metre of €2,000, for example, that's kind of roughly what we're dealing with at the moment. And your architect comes in and takes 20 square metres out of the house, just through efficiency of design, making the rooms fit that bit better, not having any wasted space in it, minimizing your circulation space. So if you take 2,000 per square metre at 20 square metres, you potentially have saved yourself 40,000 there. For me, I think getting an architect in at the start, and even if it's just the broad strokes of the design, as in, where's this house situated? Where are my rooms going to be at the different times of day when the sun is moving around the house? Where do I want to be on this site? How do I approach it? How do I maximize my views? All of those things, if you don't get them right at the start, you're not going to get them right when it comes to the build, because it's been designed at that point. Planning is in, the windows are designed, you can't change it all. So for me, having an architect at the start of a job is going to save you money in the long run if you're of a mind to get the house right from the start. Yeah, okay, so when you go to an architect, know where it is, for starters. Where's my site, or where's my house that I want to extend?
Yeah.
Know approximately your budget, all right? And that, might be, you might need to change that once you've talked to an architect, but...
It's usually increase.
Well, yeah, potentially, yeah. It's very rarely decreases, but what do I want to spend? Do I understand budgets? That's a very, very important one, because your entire project can fall flat right there if you don't have the correct budget for what you want to do. What is it that you want? Is it a 4-bedroom house in the country? Is it an extension on the back? So that's a very basic conversation that anyone, even if you don't know what it wants to look like or how it should be designed, you'll know what you want.
Yeah.
And then, what's my style? What have I seen that I liked? Most people have a Pinterest account that come to us, and we don't want your Pinterest code or your password. We don't want 2,000 images. We want to see 4 or 5 images of stuff that you've seen that you really like. And following that conversation, we'll be able to tell you then, well, look, either this is great, we can really help you out here, which is what we'll want to say, of course, and we think that we can add real value to this, or we'll say, you know what, we're not the right fit for this. Maybe there's a better architect out there for it, or maybe this is your budget is unrealistic, or maybe your brief is unrealistic. So that's a really easy conversation to have, and that's potentially that's going to take a few hours, but set aside the time. Whatever architect you go to, budget, brief, and style would be the 3 things to prepare yourself, in advance, and make sure that you have your head around. The architect might change that in terms of what's practical and what's real and what's doable, but try and have that sort of in your head as much as you can. You don't need to go to an architect with a design and say, we want you to draw this up. That's, a draftsman can do that, there's no problem. But bring those things to the table, and we'll be able to have a good conversation.
So have a basic idea of certain designs and certain elements that you're in love with, but you don't have to have a fully fledged, this is where I'm going to have my sitting room, this is where I'm going to have the dining room.
No. Let your architect drive that,
Oh, that's
get value out of your architect. Let them be an architect. Let them come up with some ideas. You're not going to have thought of a lot of the stuff that the architect will have thought of. If I'm designing houses all day, every day, I'd have an expectation that I'd come up with something more. And let me challenge you as well. Let me try and figure out if the route that you're going is the right one for you, because you might think it is, but there might be a lot of stuff that you haven't seen. The current climate is really tricky, because we have an oversupply of work, and we don't have enough architects and engineers or professionals in the country to deal with that. I'm a big believer in personal relationships, and I won't say it's intimate, but it is quite a personal relationship when you get into design. So that's very important. But also, do they have time? Does this architect have time to dedicate to this? And if somebody rings me up and asks me, do you have time for this? And if I don't, I'll simply say no.
Right. Yeah.
So you want to make sure that you want to try and trash out your expectations as well with your architect. What do we expect you to do? And some people's expectations of what an architect does would be a little different than what we do actually do. So it would be important to have that conversation as well. It comes back to it again, but the biggest one is if the conversation doesn't flow.
If it doesn't flow.
Yeah, if there's no kind of rapport there, I'd be probably just making a few more phone calls to see if there are others out there. So planning permissions are easy. Galway County Council, Galway City Council, they have their development plans. There's certain cues in that we use in order to design. Galway County Council have a whole document, based on what they want to see in their rural housing, and it's quite mature now. That document, it's been around for a few years, but it still holds true. So, we never have an issue. Design is never the problem with planning. The problem might be that the site was never suitable for a house in the first place, even though the planners told us it was. But that might be the stumbling block, or that the percolation doesn't quite work, or that there's some ownership dispute,
Yeah.
But we've never had a problem when it comes to design. And in terms of what we're seeing that's on trend, or what's current, we find the council are very proactive in bringing modern architecture to the fore. And you do hear a lot of people having problems with planning, but those problems are very often self-made.
Yeah.
The site wasn't suitable for a house at all, and we try and identify that right at the start, insofar as we can. Sometimes we get told by the council that it's fine, there'll be no problem. And then it turns out, well, actually there is a problem here.
Yeah.
You're never going to get planning, which is unfair, and it's unfortunate, and it doesn't happen very often. And now some people think that it's what your neighbour has is all you're going to be able to get, and that's not true. So we need to look at the sensitivity of the area. So there's class sensitivity for landscape in Galway, 1 to 5, and if you are a very sensitive area, you might have to design in a more traditional way.
Right.
Now it can be a contemporary design, but maybe a traditional form. It's a really interesting one, because cost-cutting measures, people are, again, they're bringing it back to this cost per square metre, and then they get a design and it's a certain number of square metres, and they go out to a builder, but the builder says, no, it's actually more expensive than that per square metre, and then their budget is blown and they're panicking, So they look at it and see, well, what can we pull out of this now in order to save cost and bring down the overall budget here? And the first things to go are the nice bits. Because it's probably the last 5 or 10% where you get the real joy in your house, the really cool little elements that you put in. So straight away people strip off any finishes that they have on the outside of the house. So if you had, say, a bit of metal cladding, or you had some stone, straight away they come off and it goes to painted render. And then they start looking at the size of the openings in it. So there's a huge big steel here, maybe if we brought it down, and they start doing that, and they start taking those large glazed elements out of it. And then you're back to a more basic house. So all of the nice bits, it's kind of like someone asks you to design or to buy a Ferrari, and you go out and you say, well, I want a Ferrari, but I don't quite have the budget for it. So let's take away the sort of the nice Italian lines off that, and let's take out the engine and put in a Ford engine into it, and let's take off the sports exhaust and put a standard. And you go back to it, then you have a much more basic product at the end. So I think, as opposed to taking out the expensive elements, try to design less expensively overall, but keep some real joy in it. Keep some really nice bits, because once you get out the machete at the end and start hacking off the cool bits, you've kind of lost it. And people do say, well, we can come back and we can do that again. We won't.